The blood on his shirt had dried to a dark rust color by the time Zelda Armstrong found him collapsed against the wooden fence post at the edge of her small property, 3 miles outside of El Dorado, Kansas. She had been walking back from checking her rabbit traps that cool October morning in 1882, when she spotted the horse first, a magnificent black stallion with a silver-trimmed saddle, grazing nervously near the cottonwood trees that lined the creek. Her heart had quickened at the sight because loose horses usually meant trouble, and trouble was something she had been trying to avoid ever since she had settled on this isolated piece of land 2 years ago. When she approached cautiously, scanning the prairie grass for any sign of danger, she saw him slumped there, his hat fallen beside him, dark hair matted with sweat and dirt. Zelda dropped her game bag and rushed forward, her practiced hands already reaching for his neck to check for a pulse. She had learned basic medical care from her mother, who had been a nurse during the war, and those skills had served her well in this unforgiving landscape. His pulse was weak but steady, and when she carefully unbuttoned his shirt, she found the source of all that blood. A bullet wound, high on his left shoulder, still seeping despite the makeshift bandage someone had tried to tie around it. "Can you hear me?" she asked, patting his face gently. His skin was hot to the touch, fever already setting in. He was a big man, probably over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of hard work despite the obvious quality of his clothing. His boots alone probably cost more than she made in 6 months selling eggs and vegetables in town. He groaned softly but did not open his eyes. Zelda made a quick decision. She could not move him alone, but she could not leave him here either. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and riding to town for help would take too long. She would have to get him to her cabin somehow. She caught the stallion easily enough. He was well trained and came when she clicked her tongue, probably relieved to find a human who might help his master. Leading the horse to where the man lay, she faced the daunting task of getting him onto the saddle. It took her nearly 20 minutes of struggling, coaxing, and pure stubborn determination, but she finally managed to drape him over the saddle, securing him as best she could with rope from the saddlebag. The walk back to her cabin felt endless. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another warm autumn day, and Zelda kept one hand on the stranger to make sure he did not slide off. Sweat trickled down her back beneath her simple cotton dress, and her arms ached from the effort of steadying him, but she pushed forward. She was 23 years old and had survived worse things than a morning of hard labor. Her cabin was small but sturdy, built by her own hands with help from a few kind folks in town who had taken pity on a young woman determined to make it on her own. It consisted of a single large room with a stone fireplace, a narrow bed in one corner, a table and chairs in another, and her few possessions neatly organized throughout. She had a small lean-to out back for her chickens, and a root cellar dug into the earth where she stored her preserves and vegetables. Getting the stranger off the horse and into her cabin proved even harder than loading him had been. But Zelda was nothing if not resourceful. She backed the horse right up to her door, tied him to the porch rail, and then half-dragged, half-carried the wounded man inside. He was heavy with muscle and deadweight unconsciousness, and by the time she got him onto her bed, she was panting hard. There was no time to rest. She built up the fire, set water to boil, and gathered her mother's medical kit, a wooden box containing needles, thread, clean cloth, and a few precious bottles of carbolic acid and laudanum. She had used these supplies sparingly over the years, saving them for true emergencies, and this certainly qualified. She cut away his shirt completely, revealing a muscular chest marked with old scars that told stories of a hard life. The bullet wound was ugly, but upon closer inspection, appeared to have passed clean through. That was good. She would not have to dig for lead. But the entry and exit wounds needed cleaning and stitching, and she had to work fast before infection set in deeper. Zelda worked with steady hands, cleaning the wounds with carbolic acid diluted in warm water, ignoring his groans of pain when she pressed too hard. She stitched him up with small, neat sutures, the way her mother had taught her, whispering reassurances even though he could not hear them. When she finished, she bandaged him properly with clean linen, then covered him with her quilt. The fever would be the real battle now. She spent the rest of that day and into the night sponging him with cool water, dribbling willow bark tea between his lips whenever he was conscious enough to swallow, and praying to a god she was not entirely sure listened to her anymore. On the second day, he began to thrash and mutter. Zelda had moved her bedroll to the floor beside him so she could monitor him through the night, and she woke repeatedly to his rambling. Most of it made no sense, fragments of names and places, but one word kept recurring. Zelda. At first, she thought she was mishearing him. But no, he definitely said her name, over and over, sometimes as a question, sometimes as a statement, sometimes with such longing it made her chest tighten with an emotion she could not name. How did this stranger know her name? She had gone through his belongings looking for identification, and had found a wallet containing a significant amount of money, several official-looking documents, and calling cards that identified him as Ethan Quinn, with an address in Abilene. There was nothing that connected him to her, nothing that explained why he would know who she was. The mystery nagged at her as she continued to care for him. She fed his horse, whom she learned from the nameplate on his bridle was called Shadow, and made sure her own animals were tended. She kept the cabin clean and the fire going, cooked simple meals for herself, and sat by his bedside during the long stretches when there was nothing to do but wait and watch. On the third day, his fever broke. Zelda woke at dawn to find him staring at her with clear gray eyes that held an intensity that made her breath catch. "Zelda Armstrong," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "I found you." She sat up quickly, reaching for the cup of water she kept nearby. "You need to drink." "Do not try to talk too much yet." He accepted the water gratefully, drinking deeply before settling back against the pillows. He did not take his eyes off her face. "You do not remember me." "I have never seen you before in my life," she said, though something in his eyes made her uncertain. There was a familiarity there she could not place, like a song heard in childhood that she could not quite recall. "Missouri," he said. 15 years ago. You were 8 years old and I was 13. Your family's wagon train was attacked by outlaws on the trail. My father and I were traveling with a group of drovers, and we helped fight them off." The memory came rushing back so suddenly, it took her breath away. She had buried those memories deep, along with so many others from that terrible journey west. Her family had been heading to California, full of hope and dreams, but they had never made it past Kansas. The attack had been brief but brutal. Several people had been killed, including her father. Her mother had been badly injured and had lingered for 3 more years before succumbing to complications from wounds that never properly healed. But yes, she remembered now. There had been cowboys, real working cowboys, not the outlaws who had attacked them. They had appeared like something from a dime novel, riding hard and shooting straight, driving off the bandits. And there had been a boy, older than her, with kind gray eyes who had given her a peppermint stick and told her everything would be all right. "You gave me candy," she whispered. Ethan's face softened into a smile that transformed his hard features into something almost gentle. "You were crying, and you had blood on your dress. It was not your blood, you told me. It was your papa's. I did not know what else to do, so I gave you the candy my mother had packed for me." "I do not understand," Zelda said, her mind reeling. "That was 15 years ago. How did you find me? Why were you looking for me?" "It is a long story," he said, then winced and pressed a hand to his shoulder. "And one that might be better told when I am not lying here useless as a newborn calf. But the short version is that I have been searching for you for the better part of 3 years. 3 years." Zelda sat back in her chair, trying to process this information. This man, this wealthy cowboy, judging by his possessions and his horse, had been looking for her specifically for 3 years. It made no logical sense. "Why?" she asked simply. Ethan's eyes held hers with an honesty that was almost painful to witness. "Because I never forgot you. Because even at 13, I knew there was something special about the little girl who was brave enough to hold her dying father and then wipe her tears and help her mother tend the wounded. Because over the years, as I built my ranch and made my fortune, I kept thinking about you, wondering what happened to you, if you survived, if you were happy. And finally, I decided to find out." "That is insane," Zelda said, but her voice was soft, not accusatory. "Maybe," he agreed. "But I did it anyway. I hired investigators. I followed leads. I learned that your mother passed away 7 years ago in St. Louis, that you worked as a seamstress for a few years, that you saved your money and bought this land 2 years ago. I learned that you are stubborn and independent and brave. And I came to Kansas to meet you, to see if the woman lived up to the memory of the girl. And then someone shot you," Zelda said. Ethan's expression darkened. "That is another story entirely. I ran into some trouble in Dodge City, got mixed up in something that was not my business but needed handling anyway. 3 men followed me when I left town. They caught up with me about 5 miles from here. I managed to get away, but not before one of them got a lucky shot." He looked around the cabin, taking in its simple but tidy appearance. "I was trying to reach El Dorado for a doctor when I passed out. Lucky for me, you found me instead." "Lucky is one word for it," Zelda said dryly. "You nearly died. You were burning up with fever for 2 days straight." "But you saved me," Ethan said quietly. "You brought me here, stitched me up, sat with me through the fever." "Why?" It was Zelda's turn to look away. "What else would I do? Leave you to die? I am many things, Mr. Quinn, but I am not heartless." "Ethan," he corrected. "Please. After everything, I think we can use first names." She nodded slowly. "Ethan, then, and I suppose you already know to call me Zelda." "I have been practicing saying it for 3 years," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Probably sounded like a fool talking to myself." Despite everything, despite her confusion and the strangeness of the situation, Zelda found herself smiling back. There was something disarming about his honesty, something appealing about a man who would admit to such foolishness without embarrassment. Over the next few days, as Ethan's strength slowly returned, they fell into an easy routine. Zelda would help him sit up in the mornings, changing his bandages and checking his wounds for signs of infection. She made broths and soft foods that he could digest easily, gradually increasing the portions as his appetite returned. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps of 15 years. Ethan told her about his life after that day on the trail. His father had been a trail boss, and Ethan had grown up in the saddle, learning the cattle business from the ground up. When his father died 8 years ago, he had left Ethan a small ranch in Texas and a bit of money. Ethan had worked like a demon, buying and selling cattle, making smart investments, and building his holdings until he owned one of the largest spreads in the state. He was wealthy now, truly wealthy, with thousands of head of cattle, dozens of employees, and business interests in 3 states. But none of it had made him happy, he confessed. He had achieved everything he thought he wanted, but something was missing. And somehow, in the quiet moments, his mind kept returning to that little girl on the trail, the one who had shown such courage in the face of tragedy. Zelda, in turn, told him about the years after the attack. They had settled in St. Louis when it became clear her mother could not continue west. Money had been tight, and Zelda had started working at age 10, first selling flowers on street corners, then as a seamstress's assistant when she was old enough. Her mother had taught her to read and write and do figures, insisting that education was the only thing no one could take from her. When her mother died, Zelda had found herself alone at 16 with no family and few prospects. She could have married. There had been offers, some even respectable, but she had wanted something different. She had wanted land of her own, a place where she answered to no one but herself. So she had saved every penny, working sometimes 16 hours a day, until she had enough to buy this small parcel in Kansas and start over. "You regret it?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat at her small table, playing cards by lamplight. He was well enough now to sit up for extended periods, though he still tired easily. Being out here alone, away from everything. Zelda considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," she admitted, "winters can be lonely, and it is hard work, harder than I expected, but it is mine. I built this cabin with my own hands. I planted every seed in my garden. When I gather eggs or sell vegetables in town, that money is mine, earned by my labor. There is a freedom in that I would not trade for comfort." "I understand that," Ethan said, laying down his cards. "When I was building the ranch, there were times I slept on the ground because I could not afford both workers and a proper bed. Times I ate nothing but beans and hard biscuits for weeks. But it was mine, and that made all the difference. So why give it up to search for me?" Zelda asked the question that had been nagging at her. "You had everything. Why risk it for a memory?" Ethan met her eyes across the table. The lamplight cast shadows on his face, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the intensity of his gaze. "Because having everything means nothing if you have no one to share it with. I could have married a dozen times. There were women who would have been happy to be my wife, to have the security and status my wealth could provide. But none of them were you." "You did not know me," Zelda protested. "I was a child when we met." "I knew enough," he said simply. "I knew you had courage and strength. I knew you faced the worst day of your life and came through it. And I thought, if I could find you again, if I could see what kind of woman you had become, maybe then I would know if what I felt was real or just a young boy's fantasy." "And now," Zelda asked, her heart beating faster, "now that you have found me, living in a one-room cabin in the middle of nowhere, with dirt under my fingernails and calluses on my hands, am I what you imagined?" Ethan reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb brushing over those calluses she had mentioned. "You are better than anything I imagined," he said quietly. "You are strong and capable and kind. You saved my life without hesitation, even though I was a stranger. You work hard and you do not complain. You have built a life for yourself against all odds. Zelda Armstrong, you are remarkable." She should pull her hand away, she thought. This was moving too fast, too intense. She barely knew this man, strange circumstances of their meeting aside. But she could not deny the connection she felt, the way her heart leaped when he looked at her, the way his presence filled her small cabin and made it feel less lonely. "I do not know what to say," she admitted. "Say you will consider letting me court you properly," Ethan said. "Once I am healed and back on my feet, let me show you that I am serious. Let me prove that this is not some flight of fancy but something real. You live in Texas," she pointed out. "I have a life here. Details we can work out if you give me a chance," he said. "I am a patient man, Zelda. I searched for you for 3 years. I can wait a while longer for you to know your own heart." She looked down at their joined hands, his large and calloused from years of hard work, her small but equally work-worn. There was something right about the picture they made together, something that felt like it had been waiting to happen for 15 years. "All right," she said finally. "Once you are healed, you may court me properly, but I make no promises, Ethan Quinn. I am not some blushing girl who will swoon at expensive gifts or pretty words." He grinned, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and carefree. "I would not expect anything less." The days passed with increasing warmth between them, both emotional and physical, as autumn deepened into late October. Ethan healed quickly, his strong constitution and Zelda's careful nursing working together to speed his recovery. Within a week, he was able to walk around the cabin, and within 2, he was insisting on helping with chores despite her protests. She would come in from gathering eggs to find he had built up the fire and made coffee. She would return from checking her traps to discover he had mucked out the chicken coop or carried water from the creek. He was still weak, his shoulder stiff and sore, but he refused to lie around doing nothing. "I am not an invalid," he insisted when she scolded him for overdoing it. "Besides, I like helping you. Makes me feel useful." They fell into a partnership that felt natural despite its newness. Zelda taught him which herbs she grew for cooking and medicine, and he shared his knowledge of horses and cattle. In the evenings, they would sit together, sometimes talking, sometimes in companionable silence, and Zelda found herself looking forward to those quiet moments more than anything else in her day. But reality intruded on their peaceful bubble one morning when a rider approached the cabin. Zelda was outside hanging laundry when she spotted him, and her stomach tightened with apprehension. Visitors were rare, and after Ethan's shooting, she had become warier than usual. Ethan emerged from the cabin, his hand instinctively going to the gun he had started wearing again now that he was mobile. But when the rider drew closer, his posture relaxed slightly. "It is all right," he said to Zelda. "That is Tom Bridger. He works for me." The rider was a lean man in his 40s with a weathered face and sharp eyes that took in everything about the cabin and Zelda in one sweeping glance. He dismounted and nodded respectfully to her before turning to Ethan. "Boss," he said, relief evident in his voice. "We have been looking for you for 2 weeks. When you did not show up in El Dorado like you planned, we feared the worst." "I ran into some trouble," Ethan said. "Got shot, but Miss Armstrong here saved my life. Tom Bridger, this is Zelda Armstrong." "Zelda, Tom has been my foreman for 5 years and is one of the few men I trust completely." Tom removed his hat and gave Zelda a genuine smile. "Madam, I am mighty grateful to you for taking care of the boss. He is too stubborn to die, but it is good to know someone was looking after him." "He was lucky I found him when I did," Zelda said. "Another few hours and I do not think there would have been much I could do." "The men who shot me," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "Did you deal with them?" Tom's expression darkened. "We tracked 2 of them to Dodge City. They are in jail waiting for the circuit judge. The 3rd one lit out for Indian Territory. Marshall says he is someone else's problem now." Ethan nodded slowly. "Good. I want to press charges. Make sure they understand that shooting people and robbing them has consequences." "Already done, boss." "Marshall has your statement that you filed before you left Dodge. You will need to come testify when the trial happens, but that will not be for a few weeks yet." The conversation moved on to ranch business, and Zelda excused herself to give them privacy. She went about her chores, trying not to listen but unable to help overhearing. They talked about cattle sales and fence repairs, about hiring new hands and a problem with rustlers near the southern boundary of Ethan's land. The scale of his operation became clear as they talked, and Zelda felt a growing sense of unreality. This man who had been sleeping in her bed, drinking from her tin cups, helping her gather eggs, was not just wealthy. He was important, a significant rancher with responsibilities to dozens of people who depended on him for their livelihoods. What was she thinking, agreeing to let him court her? They came from completely different worlds now. She was a small homesteader scratching out a living on 160 acres. He owned thousands and had business interests she could barely comprehend. It would never work. But when Tom finally rode away with promises to return in a few days with supplies and a wagon, Ethan came to find her in the garden where she was pulling up the last of the carrots. He knelt beside her, apparently unconcerned about dirtying his borrowed pants. "You are thinking too much," he said. "I can see it on your face. You are building up walls and reasons why this cannot work." "Am I wrong?" she asked, not looking at him. "You just spent an hour discussing business I cannot even begin to understand. You are not just some cowboy, Ethan. You are a cattle baron, a man of property and influence. What do you need with a homesteader who barely makes enough to feed herself?" Ethan took the carrot from her hand and set it aside, then cupped her chin and turned her face toward his. His eyes were serious but warm. "I need you because you see me, not my money or my land. I need you because you make me laugh and challenge me and do not treat me like I am something special just because I have a big ranch. I need you because in 2 weeks with you, I have felt more at home than I have in years in my big house with servants and every comfort money can buy." "That is foolish," Zelda whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Maybe," he agreed, "but I have made my fortune being smart and careful. Maybe it is time I did something foolish for the right reasons." He leaned closer, his breath warm on her face. "Tell me you do not feel it too. Tell me I am alone in this and I will walk away. It will kill me, but I will do it." She could not tell him that. She had felt the connection between them growing stronger every day, had caught herself watching him when he was not looking, had lain awake at night imagining what it would be like if he kissed her. It terrified her, this feeling, because she had worked so hard to build a life that depended on no one but herself. Letting someone in meant risking everything. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability there beneath the confidence, she realized that he was risking just as much. Maybe more. He had everything to lose and was willing to lose it all for a chance at something real. "I feel it," she admitted quietly. "I am just scared." "Me too," he said and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question more than a statement. But when she responded, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, it deepened into something that made her head spin and her heart race. He tasted like the coffee they had shared that morning, and his hands were gentle as they cradled her face like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I have imagined kissing you for 3 years," he said. "Reality is better." Zelda laughed, a breathless sound of joy she had not known she was capable of. "You are definitely foolish, Ethan Quinn." "For you, Zelda Armstrong, I will be as foolish as you need me to be." Over the next week, their relationship shifted into something deeper and more certain. Ethan was careful to respect her boundaries, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but the kisses they shared became more frequent and more passionate. He would pull her into his arms while she was cooking and kiss the top of her head. She would reach for his hand while they sat by the fire and lace her fingers through his. They talked about everything, learning each other's hopes and fears and dreams. Ethan spoke of his vision for his ranch, how he wanted it to be a place where people were treated fairly and worked hard because they wanted to, not because they had to. He told her about the school he wanted to build for the children of his workers, and the plans he had to improve the breeding stock of his cattle. Zelda shared her own dreams, smaller in scale but no less important. She wanted to expand her garden, maybe get a milk cow, build a proper barn for chickens and possibly some pigs. She talked about her hope to eventually have enough land to really farm, to grow wheat or corn and feel the satisfaction of bringing in a real harvest. "What if you had all the land you needed?" Ethan asked one night as they lay side by side on her bed, properly clothed but intimately close. He had been sleeping on a pallet on the floor since he was well enough to leave the bed to her, but tonight she had invited him to lie beside her, wanting his warmth and closeness. "What would you do then?" "I do not know," she admitted. "I have spent so long just surviving that I have not thought much past that. What would I do with prosperity? It seems impossible to imagine." "Imagine it with me," he urged. "Come to Texas, see my ranch, see what we could build together." She rolled onto her side to face him. "You are asking me to leave everything I have worked for." "No," he said firmly. "I am asking you to expand what you have worked for. Keep this land. We can hire someone to work it or leave it fallow. But come with me and see what your skills and determination could accomplish with real resources behind them. You are a farmer at heart, Zelda. I can see it in the way you tend your garden, the pride you take in your animals. Imagine what you could do with 100 acres of good farmland and hands to help work it." It was tempting, so tempting it frightened her. "I barely know you," she said, but it was a weak protest. In the weeks they had spent together, she had learned him in ways that had nothing to do with time. She knew he was honest and kind, hardworking and principled. She knew he treated her as an equal, valued her opinions and listened when she spoke. She knew his kiss made her feel things she had never felt before, and his absence, even for a few hours, left her feeling incomplete. "Then let us fix that," Ethan said. "Marry me." Zelda's breath caught in her throat. "What?" He sat up, taking her hands in his. In the dim firelight, his face was earnest and open. "Marry me, Zelda. I know it is fast. I know you deserve a longer courtship and flowers and all the proper courting rituals. But I have waited 15 years to find you again. I do not want to waste any more time. I love you. I think I have loved you since I was a boy and you were a brave little girl facing down tragedy. And I know I will love you for the rest of my life if you give me the chance." "Ethan," she breathed, her eyes filling with tears. "This is insane." "I know," he said, smiling, "but say yes anyway." She looked at him, this man who had turned her carefully ordered world upside down, and felt the last of her resistance crumble. She had been alone for so long, fighting so hard to prove she did not need anyone. But maybe needing someone was not weakness. Maybe it was the bravest thing she could do. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan's shout of joy probably woke every animal within a mile. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, until she was dizzy and laughing and crying all at once. When he finally let her breathe, he was grinning like a madman. "You will not regret this," he promised. "I will spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." "You better," she said, trying to sound stern but failing completely. "Because I am giving up my independence for you, Ethan Quinn, and that is not something I do lightly." "You are not giving up anything," he corrected. "You are gaining a partner. Everything I have is yours. Every decision we make together. I do not want a wife who serves me, Zelda. I want a partner who challenges me and works beside me and builds something amazing with me." It was everything she had not known she wanted and more. They stayed up late into the night making plans, talking about when and where they would marry, what they would do with her property, when they would travel to Texas. Ethan wanted to marry immediately, to ride into El Dorado the next day and find a preacher, but Zelda insisted on waiting at least a week. "I need time to get used to the idea," she said. "And you need to fully heal. And we should do this properly, with witnesses and proper clothes. I may be marrying in haste, but I want to remember my wedding day as something special, not a rushed affair because we could not wait." Ethan agreed, though his impatience was evident. "1 week," he said, "but not a day longer. I have waited long enough to make you my wife." Tom returned 3 days later with the wagon and supplies as promised, along with 2 other hands from Ethan's ranch. He also brought dresses from the general store, boots, a proper coat, and other items Ethan had requested in a letter he had sent back with Tom. The clothes were beautiful, far finer than anything Zelda had ever owned, and she felt overwhelmed by the generosity. "I cannot accept all this," she protested as Ethan laid out dress after dress for her inspection. "It is too much." "It is not nearly enough," he countered. "Besides, you will need proper clothes for the journey to Texas and for your new life as a ranch owner's wife. Consider it a practical investment." She wanted to argue but had to admit he had a point. Her few serviceable dresses would not hold up to the kind of life he was describing. Reluctantly, she accepted the gifts, though she insisted on keeping her old clothes as well. "They remind me of who I am," she said when Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I do not want to forget where I came from." "I would never let you forget," he said softly. "Your strength and independence are part of what I love about you. I just want to give you choices you did not have before." With Tom's help, they made quick work of preparing for the wedding. Tom rode into El Dorado and arranged for the local minister to come out to the cabin the following Sunday. He also spread the word, and to Zelda's surprise, several of her neighbors expressed interest in attending. She had kept to herself mostly, but apparently her hard work and determination had earned her more respect than she realized. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Zelda cleaned the cabin until it shone, made bread and pies for the celebration, and tried on the dresses Ethan had bought until she settled on a simple but elegant blue silk that made her eyes look even deeper. Ethan had a suit in his saddlebags, carefully preserved despite his ordeal, and when he tried it on, Zelda's breath caught at how handsome he looked. "You clean up well, Cowboy," she said, and he laughed. "You have not seen anything yet. Wait until you see me at a proper dance with my hair combed and my boots polished." Sunday dawned clear and cool, perfect autumn weather. Zelda woke early, nervous energy making sleep impossible. She heated water and washed carefully, then put on the blue dress and attempted to style her hair in a more sophisticated fashion than her usual simple braid. The result was not perfect, but it would do. When she emerged from behind the privacy screen she had rigged, Ethan was waiting, and the look on his face made all her nervousness worth it. "You are beautiful," he said simply. "I am the luckiest man alive." "You are prejudiced," she said, but she smiled. "But I will take the compliment anyway." People began arriving mid-morning. Her nearest neighbors, the Johnsons, came with their 3 children. Several townspeople who knew her from her weekly trips to market appeared, bearing gifts of preserves and bread and good wishes. Tom and the other ranch hands stood as Ethan's witnesses, looking uncomfortable in their clean shirts and slicked-back hair. The minister, a young man newly assigned to El Dorado, arrived right on time. He seemed slightly overwhelmed by the crowd that had gathered but rallied gamely, setting up his Bible on Zelda's table and clearing his throat. "Dearly beloved," he began, and Zelda felt Ethan's hand find hers, strong and sure. The ceremony was simple but moving. They exchanged vows, their voices clear and certain, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Ethan kissed her with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance sighed audibly. The celebration that followed was more elaborate than Zelda had expected. The Johnsons had brought their fiddle, and soon music filled the air. Tables were set up outside and food appeared as if by magic, everyone contributing what they could. There was dancing and laughter and toasts to the happy couple. Zelda found herself swept into dance after dance, passed from partner to partner, until Ethan finally claimed her and refused to let anyone else cut in. "I have had enough of sharing you," he said, pulling her close as they swayed to a slower tune. "You are mine now, Mrs. Quinn." "And you are mine," she replied, testing out the sound of her new name. "Mr. Quinn." They danced until the sun began to set, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange. Gradually, the guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Tom was the last to leave, giving Ethan a knowing look and telling him they would head back to Texas in a few days, whenever the newlyweds were ready. Finally, they were alone. Zelda stood on her porch, watching the last wagon disappear down the road, and felt Ethan's arms come around her from behind. "Happy?" he asked, his lips brushing her ear. "More than I thought possible," she admitted, leaning back against him. "Scared too, but happy." "The scared part will pass," he promised. "Or we will be scared together, which somehow makes it better." He turned her in his arms and kissed her deeply, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. They were married now, properly and legally, and the constraints that had governed their previous intimacy no longer applied. Ethan lifted her into his arms, carrying her into the cabin and kicking the door shut behind them. What followed was tender and passionate, awkward and perfect. Zelda had never been with a man before, and Ethan was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. There was some pain, but it was overshadowed by the overwhelming sense of connection, of two people becoming one in the most fundamental way possible. Afterward, they lay tangled together in her narrow bed, Ethan's hand stroking her hair while she traced idle patterns on his chest. "I love you," she said, the words coming easily now. "I do not think I realized how much until today, but I do. I love you, Ethan Quinn." "And I love you, Zelda Quinn," he replied, the joy in his voice unmistakable. "From now until forever." They spent the next 3 days in a cocoon of newlywed bliss, barely leaving the cabin except to tend the animals. They made love and talked and planned their future, building dreams in the quiet Kansas autumn. But reality could not be held off forever, and on the 4th day, Tom returned with a letter that brought the outside world crashing back in. Ethan read it quickly, his expression darkening. "There is trouble at the ranch," he said. "The rustlers got bold. They hit the South Range hard, made off with nearly 100 head of cattle. 2 of my hands were injured trying to stop them." "You have to go," Zelda said, understanding immediately. "We have to go," he corrected. "You are my wife now. Where I go, you go, unless you would rather stay here while I deal with this." It was tempting. The thought of leaving her little cabin, her land, everything familiar was daunting, but she had made a choice when she married him, and she meant to stick to it. "No," she said firmly. "We go together. Give me an hour to pack what I need and secure the house." Ethan's smile was brilliant with relief and pride. "Have I mentioned lately that you are remarkable? Not in the last few hours," she said, kissing him quickly. "But you can remind me on the way to Texas." Packing took longer than an hour, but by midday they were ready. Zelda had arranged with the Johnsons to check on her property weekly and harvest anything from the garden that was still producing. She packed her most precious possessions, including her mother's medical kit and the few photographs she owned, into a trunk that Tom secured in the wagon. Her chickens were gifted to the Johnsons' delighted children, and her remaining supplies were divided among the ranch hands. As they prepared to leave, Zelda took one last walk around her property, memorizing every detail. She had put so much of herself into this place, had poured her sweat and tears into every board and post. Leaving it felt like abandoning a piece of herself. Ethan found her standing by the fence post where she had first discovered him, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "We can stay if you need to," he said quietly. "The ranch will survive without me a while longer." She turned to him, this man who had changed everything, and shook her head. "No. This was my past, and it will always be here if I need it. But you are my future, and your fight is my fight now. Let us go deal with these rustlers and start our life together." The journey to Texas took 2 weeks of hard traveling. They moved as quickly as the wagon would allow, camping under the stars at night and covering as many miles as possible during the day. Zelda discovered that she enjoyed life on the trail more than she expected. There was a freedom in the open country, a sense of possibility in the endless horizons. Ethan was a patient teacher, showing her how to properly care for Shadow and the other horses, how to read the weather and find water, how to cook over an open fire. She in turn taught him some of her mother's medical knowledge and her own skills with preserving and preparing food. They made a good team, and the ranch hands who traveled with them seemed to sense it, treating Zelda with a respect that had nothing to do with being the boss's wife and everything to do with her competence. As they crossed into Texas, the landscape changed from Kansas prairie to rolling hills and eventually to the flat grasslands, where Ethan's ranch sprawled across thousands of acres. They started seeing cattle bearing his brand, a stylized cue that reminded Zelda of his surname, and hands riding patrol who greeted Ethan with relief and respect. "The house is just over that rise," Ethan said as they climbed a gentle hill in the late afternoon light. "I know it is not what you are used to, being so much bigger than your cabin, but I hope you will come to think of it as home." Zelda was prepared for something impressive, but when the ranch house came into view, she gasped audibly. It was huge, a 2-story structure with a wide wraparound porch, multiple chimneys, and windows that gleamed in the fading light. Outbuildings surrounded it, a massive barn, a bunkhouse, several sheds and corrals, creating a small village in the middle of the grassland. "That is your house?" she asked weakly. "Our house," Ethan corrected. "And I know it looks like a lot, but most of it we barely use. I had it built big because I always hoped to fill it with a family someday." He glanced at her, suddenly uncertain. "Is it too much?" "It is overwhelming," she admitted. "But I suppose I will adjust. I have gotten good at adjusting." As they drew closer, people began emerging from various buildings. Men who worked the ranch, women who ran the household, all gathering to welcome Ethan home and meet his new bride. Zelda felt herself tensing under their scrutiny, aware that she looked travel-worn and dusty, hardly the picture of a wealthy rancher's wife. But Ethan seemed oblivious to any awkwardness. He dismounted and helped her down from the wagon, keeping his arm around her waist as he made introductions. There was Maria, the housekeeper, a stout Mexican woman with kind eyes who immediately declared that Zelda looked exhausted and needed a hot bath and a proper meal. There was William, the ranch manager who had been holding things together in Ethan's absence, looking relieved to hand responsibility back over. There were dozens of others, more names than Zelda could possibly remember, all blurring together in her tired mind. Finally, Ethan took pity on her and ushered her into the house. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, with polished wood floors, substantial furniture, and touches of luxury she had only read about in books. He led her upstairs to what was clearly the master bedroom, a large space dominated by an enormous bed and decorated in shades of deep blue and cream. "This is your room now," he said. "Our room. Maria will bring up water for a bath, and I need to meet with William about the rustler situation." Will you be all right for an hour or so? Zelda nodded, too overwhelmed to do much else. After he left, she sank down onto the bed, feeling the expensive mattress give beneath her weight, and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, she had been a simple homesteader living alone in a Kansas cabin. Now she was a wealthy rancher's wife in Texas, surrounded by more luxury than she had ever imagined, responsible for a household full of people she did not know. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Maria proved to be a godsend, appearing with buckets of steaming water and gentle chatter that required no response. She filled the large copper tub that sat in the corner of the room, laid out towels and soap that smelled of lavender, and promised to bring dinner up on a tray since Zelda looked too tired to face the dining room. After Maria left, Zelda stripped off her travel-stained clothes and sank into the hot water with a sigh of pure bliss. She could not remember the last time she had had a proper bath in a real tub. She scrubbed away days of trail dust and let the heat soak into her tired muscles, finally allowing herself to relax. She must have dozed off because she woke to Ethan's gentle touch on her shoulder. The water had gone lukewarm, and the room was darker, lit only by a few strategically placed lamps. "Sorry," he said softly. "You looked so peaceful I hated to wake you, but you will turn into a prune if you stay in there much longer." She let him help her out of the tub, wrapping her in a thick towel that was softer than anything she had ever owned. He had brought one of her new nightgowns, a modest white cotton affair, and she slipped it on while he politely turned his back. "How did your meeting go?" she asked as they climbed into the massive bed together. "The rustlers are organized, probably led by someone who knows the area well," Ethan said, pulling her close so her head rested on his shoulder. "We have a plan to increase patrols and set some traps. William thinks we can catch them within a few weeks, but enough about that. How are you holding up?" "This has to be a huge change from what you are used to." "It is strange," she admitted. "Everything is so big and fancy. I keep thinking I am going to break something expensive or say something stupid in front of all those people. I am not cut out to be a grand lady, Ethan. I am just a girl who knows how to plant vegetables and tend chickens." He rolled over so they were face to face, his expression serious. "You are exactly who you need to be. Those people down there are not looking for a grand lady. They are looking for someone genuine who treats them fairly and works hard. You already know how to do all those things. The rest is just details." "Easy for you to say," she murmured. "You grew up knowing how to handle all this." "I grew up sleeping on the ground and eating beans," he reminded her. 5 years ago, this house did not even exist. I built it because I thought it was what successful people did, but half the time it just feels empty and pretentious. You will make it a home, Zelda. You will bring life to it. I have complete faith in you." His confidence was touching, even if she did not entirely share it, but she was too tired to argue, and his presence was comforting. She fell asleep in his arms, feeling safe despite her uncertainty about the future. The next weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment. Maria took Zelda under her wing, teaching her the rhythms of the household and introducing her to the other staff. There was Sarah, who did the cooking and baking, and her daughter Emma, who helped with cleaning. There was old Henry, who tended the extensive vegetable garden and the orchard that Ethan had planted 3 years ago. There were the ranch hands who rotated through for meals, a rotating cast of weathered cowboys who were polite but reserved with the new mistress of the house. Zelda threw herself into learning her new role with the same determination she had brought to every challenge in her life. She observed how Maria ran the household and began making suggestions, small changes that improved efficiency. She spent time in the kitchen with Sarah, sharing recipes and techniques from her own experience. She walked the gardens with Henry, discussing soil composition and planting schedules with an enthusiasm that made the old man's eyes light up. But it was her relationship with the ranch itself that truly cemented her place. Ethan took her riding every morning, teaching her the boundaries of their land and introducing her to the men who worked it. She learned about cattle and horses, about grass and water rights, about the delicate balance required to run a successful operation in the harsh Texas climate, and she learned about the rustlers. The organized thieves who had been plaguing the ranch were led by a man named Jack Dalton, a former ranch hand who had been fired for drinking and stealing. He had gathered a crew of discontents and was systematically hitting ranches throughout the area, including Ethan's. "We will catch him," Ethan promised after another raid cost them 50 head of cattle. "But he is smart. He knows this country and he knows how we think. It is only a matter of time, though." Time came sooner than expected. 2 weeks after Zelda's arrival, the ranch hands set a trap, leaving a small herd apparently unguarded in a tempting location. When Dalton's crew moved in, they found themselves surrounded by armed cowboys who had been lying in wait. There was a brief exchange of gunfire, but the rustlers were outnumbered and outgunned. They surrendered quickly, and Dalton himself was captured trying to flee on horseback. No one was seriously injured, and the stolen cattle were recovered. Ethan returned to the house that night looking tired but triumphant. Zelda had been pacing the parlor since the shooting started, too far away to see but close enough to hear, and she threw herself into his arms when he walked through the door. "You are all right?" she demanded, running her hands over him to check for injuries. "I am fine," he assured her, laughing at her fervor. "We got them all and everyone on our side is safe. It is over, Zelda. We can finally breathe easy." The threat removed, life at the ranch settled into a comfortable rhythm. Zelda found her place not as some grand lady, but as a working partner in the operation. She took over management of the extensive garden, expanding it to include more of the herbs and vegetables she knew how to grow. She started a project to preserve food for the coming winter, teaching Sarah and Emma advanced techniques her mother had taught her. She also began riding out with Ethan more regularly, learning the cattle business from the ground up. She had a natural talent for it, he told her, a way of seeing patterns and making connections that helped improve their operations. She started keeping detailed records, tracking which bulls produced the best offspring, which cows were most productive, where the best grazing was at different times of year. The ranch hands, initially skeptical of their boss's unusual wife, came to respect her competence and appreciate her kindness. She learned all their names, asked about their families, and made sure they were fairly treated and properly cared for. When one of the younger hands broke his leg, she nursed him with the same skill she had shown with Ethan, earning his eternal gratitude and the respect of his peers. As autumn deepened into winter, Zelda realized she was happy in a way she had never been before. She had thought contentment lay in independence, in answering to no one. But she had discovered something better: partnership, working alongside someone who valued her contributions and supported her dreams. "I think I want to start a school," she told Ethan one evening as they sat by the fire in the parlor. Outside, the first real cold snap of winter was making the windows frost over, but inside it was warm and cozy. Ethan looked up from the ledger he had been reviewing. "A school. For the workers' children and any other kids in the area," she elaborated. "I can teach them reading and writing and arithmetic. Basic things that will help them in life. We have that empty building near the bunkhouse that is not being used for anything. We could convert it easily enough." His face split into a wide grin. "That is a brilliant idea. I had been thinking about it too, but had not gotten around to doing anything about it. If you want to take it on, you have my full support. Whatever you need, just tell me." They talked late into the night, planning the school, and when they finally went to bed, Ethan made love to her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "You are amazing," he whispered against her hair afterward. "Every day you surprise me with something new. I love you more than I can possibly express." "Show me instead," she said, and he did, again and again, until they fell asleep tangled together as the winter wind howled outside. Winter passed in a blur of activity. The school became a reality, opening in January with 6 students and growing to 12 by February. Zelda taught 5 days a week, loving every minute of it. The children were eager to learn, and their parents were grateful for the opportunity. She also discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, small symptoms she initially dismissed, until Maria gently asked if she had considered the possibility. When the local doctor confirmed it, Zelda felt a mix of joy and terror that left her breathless. Ethan's reaction was pure elation. He swept her into his arms and spun her around, whooping with joy until she laughingly demanded he put her down before she got sick. He became almost comically protective, insisting she rest more, eat more, do less of everything that might strain her. "I am pregnant, not invalid," she protested when he tried to stop her from teaching. "Women have been having babies since the dawn of time while continuing to work. I will be fine." They compromised. She continued teaching but gave up riding and some of the heavier chores. Ethan hired an assistant for her, a young woman named Grace who had basic education and was eager to learn. Together, they made a good team, and the school continued to thrive. Spring arrived with wildflowers and new calves, and Zelda's belly swelled with their child. She had never felt more alive, more connected to the cycle of life and growth. The ranch was thriving too, the cattle healthy and multiplying, the land responding to their careful management. "Have you thought about names?" Ethan asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. His hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby kick. "If it is a girl, I want to name her Rose," Zelda said, "after my mother." Her middle name was Rose, though everyone called her by her first name. "If it is a boy, I thought maybe Samuel, after your father." Ethan's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "My pa would have loved that. He always said his biggest regret was not living long enough to see grandchildren." "He is seeing this one now," Zelda said softly. "Wherever he is watching and proud of the man you have become." The baby arrived on a hot July afternoon, coming fast and hard after a labor that left Zelda exhausted but triumphant. It was a boy, strong and healthy, with a tuft of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly as demonstrated by his lusty crying. Ethan held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "He is perfect," he breathed. "Zelda, he is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you. Thank you for this, for him, for everything." Samuel Quinn grew quickly, a healthy baby who seemed to thrive in the Texas sunshine. Zelda balanced motherhood with her other responsibilities, teaching with Samuel in a cradle beside her desk, involving him in ranch life from his earliest days. As Samuel approached his first birthday, Zelda found herself pregnant again. This time, she was calmer about it, knowing what to expect. Their daughter arrived the following spring, a tiny thing with her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes. "Rosalind," Ethan said when he first held her. "Rose for your mother, but Linda was my mother's name. Rosalind Quinn. What do you think?" "I think it is perfect," Zelda said, watching her husband cradle their daughter with the same wonder he had shown with Samuel. "I think we are building something amazing here, Ethan Quinn. A family, a legacy, something that will last." He leaned over to kiss her, careful of the baby between them, We are building it together. That is what makes it amazing. The years that followed were full and rich. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. The school grew to include 20 students and 2 teachers. Samuel and Rosalind were joined by 2 more children, twins named Jacob and Emma, born when Samuel was 5. Zelda often thought back to that October morning when she had found a bleeding stranger by her fence post, never imagining how completely he would change her life. She had been so determined to remain independent, so sure that needing anyone was weakness. But she had learned that the greatest strength came not from standing alone, but from choosing to stand with someone who made you better. Ethan proved every day that his love was real and lasting. He treated her as an equal partner in all things, valued her opinions, and supported her dreams. Together, they built not just a successful ranch but a community, a place where people were treated fairly, and children had opportunities their parents never had. When Samuel turned 10, they made a trip back to Kansas to visit Zelda's old homestead. The cabin still stood, a bit weathered but sound, maintained by the Johnsons as promised. Zelda walked through the small space with her children, telling them stories of her life there, of how their father had come into her life when she needed him most. "Were you scared?" young Rosalind asked. "When you found Papa bleeding, were you scared he would die?" "Terrified," Zelda admitted. "But I did what needed to be done. That is what we do when we love someone. We face the fear and do what needs to be done anyway." They stayed a week, and Zelda found closure she had not known she needed. This place had been important, a symbol of her independence and strength. But it was part of her past now, not her future. Her future was in Texas with Ethan and their children, building something that would outlast them both. On their last night in Kansas, she and Ethan sat on the cabin's small porch while the children slept inside. The stars overhead were the same stars that shone over Texas, constant and eternal. "You ever regret it?" Ethan asked quietly. "Giving this up to come with me?" "Never," she said firmly. "Not once. You gave me something better than independence, Ethan. You gave me partnership. You gave me love. You gave me a family and a purpose and a life richer than anything I could have built alone." "You would have built something amazing anyway," he said. "You are that kind of person. But I am grateful every day that you chose to build it with me." They returned to Texas and to their life, which continued to unfold in wonderful and unexpected ways. The ranch became one of the most successful in the state, known not just for quality cattle but for fair treatment of workers and innovative practices. Zelda's school earned a reputation for excellence, and children came from miles around to attend. As their children grew, Samuel showed an aptitude for the business side of ranching, while Rosalind inherited her mother's love of teaching. The twins were still young but already showing their distinct personalities, Jacob quiet and thoughtful, Emma bold and adventurous. When Samuel turned 18, Ethan officially made him a partner in the ranch, recognizing his contributions and ensuring the legacy would continue. It was a day of celebration, with a party that drew friends from across 3 counties. As Zelda watched her son stand beside his father, looking so much like the man she had found bleeding all those years ago, she felt her heart might burst with pride and joy. That night, after the guests had departed and the children were finally in bed, Ethan and Zelda sat together in the parlor as they had done countless times before. He took her hand, raising it to his lips for a gentle kiss. "We did it," he said softly. "We built something lasting, something real." "We are still building," Zelda corrected with a smile. "There is so much more to do. Rosalind wants to open a second school in town. Jacob has been talking about studying to be a veterinarian. Emma has her heart set on learning to train horses properly. Our work is far from finished." "No," Ethan agreed, pulling her close. "But that is what makes it exciting. Every day is a new adventure with you, Zelda Quinn. Even after all these years, you still surprise me, still challenge me, still make me grateful I was stubborn enough to spend 3 years searching for you." She laughed, the sound rich in content. "And I am grateful I was stubborn enough to drag a bleeding cowboy back to my cabin instead of leaving him to his fate." "Match made in heaven," Ethan said, kissing her. "Two stubborn people too pig-headed to give up on anything, including each other." "Especially each other," Zelda agreed. They sat together as the fire burned low, comfortable in the silence that came from years of partnership. Outside, the Texas night was alive with the sounds of the ranch, cattle lowing, horses nickering, the distant call of a coyote. Inside, their children slept safe and warm, dreaming dreams made possible by the love and determination of two people who had found each other against all odds. As she drifted toward sleep in her husband's arms, Zelda reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought them together. A violent attack on a wagon train 15 years ago, a shooting outside Dodge City, a morning walk to check rabbit traps, each event seemingly random but together forming a pattern that made perfect sense. She had nursed a wounded stranger back to health, never knowing he was a wealthy cowboy who had been searching for her, carrying a memory of a brave little girl and hoping to find the woman she had become. And in saving his life, she had saved her own in ways she had not even known she needed saving. Their story was not a fairy tale of perfect people living perfect lives. It was real and messy and hard, full of challenges and setbacks and moments of doubt. But it was theirs, built on mutual respect and genuine love, strengthened by shared work and common purpose. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and sorrows, triumphs and trials. They saw their children grow and marry and start families of their own. They weathered droughts and market crashes, illnesses and losses. But through it all, they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense of the word. When Ethan turned 55, they threw a massive celebration that brought people from across the state. The ranch had grown to be one of the largest and most successful in Texas, employing over 100 people and known for its progressive practices. The school now had 3 buildings and taught children from first grade through high school, with graduates going on to universities and successful careers. Standing on the porch of their house, looking out at the crowd of family and friends, Zelda felt overwhelmed by gratitude for the life they had built. Their 4 children were there with their spouses and children, giving Ethan and Zelda 7 grandchildren and counting. Former students had come to honor the woman who had taught them to read and write, workers past and present to celebrate a boss who had always treated them fairly. "Quite a turnout," Ethan said, slipping his arm around her waist. His hair was gray now, his face more lined, but his eyes still held the same warmth and love they had shown that first day he had opened them to find her caring for him. "We have been blessed," Zelda said simply. "So very blessed." As they aged, they gradually handed over more responsibilities to Samuel and his siblings, but neither of them ever fully retired. Zelda continued to teach a few classes and mentor new teachers. Ethan rode the ranch daily, checking on cattle and workers, unable to stay away from the work that had defined so much of his life. They celebrated their 30th wedding anniversary surrounded by family, and Ethan surprised her with a gift, a portrait he had commissioned showing her as she had been that day she found him, young and strong and determined, standing in front of her Kansas cabin. "I wanted to capture that woman," he explained as she stared at the painting with tears in her eyes. "The one who was brave enough to take a chance on a bleeding stranger. The one who built a life from nothing and then had the courage to risk it all for love. That woman is my hero, Zelda. She always has been. I am still her, Zelda said, touching his face gently. Older and grayer, but still her. Still brave enough to face whatever comes next as long as I face it with you. Life continued its inevitable march forward. They saw grandchildren grow into adults and start families of their own. The ranch passed fully into Samuel's capable hands, though Ethan remained a valued advisor until the end of his days. The school system they had started educated hundreds of children, many of whom went on to do remarkable things. When Ethan passed away at 72, peacefully in his sleep with Zelda beside him, it felt like the end of an era. The funeral drew people from across Texas and beyond, all coming to pay respects to a man who had built an empire but never forgotten the people who helped him build it. Zelda grieved deeply, but not desperately. They had been blessed with 39 years of marriage, countless memories, and a legacy that would endure for generations. She had loved him with her whole heart, and he had loved her the same way, and that was more than most people ever got. She lived for another 6 years, remaining active in the school and involved with her family. She got to see 2 great-grandchildren born, got to watch her children and grandchildren thrive and grow. And when her time came, she went peacefully, surrounded by family, content in the knowledge that her life had mattered. They buried her beside Ethan on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together on their first anniversary. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, and a single line that Samuel chose: partners in all things. The ranch continued to thrive under Samuel and his children, carrying forward the values and practices Ethan and Zelda had established. The school grew into a full educational complex, eventually adding a college. Their story became family legend, told and retold to each new generation, a reminder of what 2 people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over independence, and determination over despair. And sometimes, on quiet autumn mornings when the air was cool and clear, people swore they could see 2 figures walking hand in hand across the prairie, a tall man and a sturdy woman, still partners, still building, still deeply in love even beyond death. Their story began with blood on a fence post and a woman brave enough to help. It grew into a love that changed not just 2 lives but countless others, creating ripples that spread out across space and time. It was a story of second chances and patient searching, of recognizing when fate offered something precious and having the courage to reach for it. It was, quite simply, a story of 2 stubborn people who loved each other enough to build a world. And in that world, that legacy of love and partnership, they lived forever.